Hi, welcome to episode 14, Yay, of Pink's Picks, recommendations from a retired English teacher. Today's title is Bitter River by Julia Keller, who won the Pulitzer Prize for feature writing when she was a journalist for the Chicago Tribune. Bitter River is actually the second of 8 novels in Keller's mystery series featuring protagonist Belle Elkins, the lead prosecutor in the fictional small town Ackers Gap, West Virginia. Worry not, each story stands alone, so you don't really need to read the first, A Killing in the Hills, to enjoy Bitter River, which begins with the discovery of the dead body of a well-liked female phenom from the local high school. With 386 pages and 63 chapters, structurally this is similar to the James Patterson, Candice Fox title that I discussed in episode 1, The Inn. It's easy to pick up and to put down with such frequent divisions. And sometimes that's very important, particularly for a summer read or, in fact, again, during this coronavirus. What distinguishes this book from other murder mysteries is setting. In her acknowledgements, Keller said she pays homage to a fellow West Virginian who she shares her complicated love for a complicated place. Born and raised in West Virginia myself and a proud alum of West Virginia University, I completely understand Keller's passion for such a breathtakingly beautiful, but still very, very misunderstood state. So, what do I love about this book? I love Keller's choices for characters' surnames. For example, Crutchfield, Doggett, Dolan, Hankins, Hotstetler, Lovejoy, Mather, Sheets, and first names. Mary Sue, Mary Lou, any litany of Marys, in fact. Abners, Busters, Claytons, Hickeys, all familiar monikers from my youth. I love her reference to West Virginia's roots when describing the church where the Dead Teens service is held. Keller writes, the western part of the state, the part that in the dark days of the Civil War would officially become West Virginia, once a worried President Lincoln figured out how to finagle the split, was home to fervent abolitionists, to women and men who risked their lives to fight against slavery. The people who maintained churches like this one in Briny Hollow had done more to rid the earth of the horrific sin of slavery, Bell believed, than all the preening politicians and their noble sounding speeches put together. That to me is very telling because a lot of people really don't understand that about West Virginia. In fact, I cannot tell you the number of times that when people have asked where I'm from and I've said West Virginia, they'd say, oh, I have family in Roanoke or Virginia Beach. And I'm thinking, gads. West Virginia became a state in 1863, but there are people in 2020 who still don't know that exists. In some ways, that's best kept secret, perhaps. I love that her characters take care of their own, which is very, very typical of West Virginians, but in turn, as a reader, makes us care very, very much about them. Keller's depiction of the dangerous and often deadly 2-lane country roads, steeply and sharply zigzagging around mountains, is spot on, let me tell you. They're frightening, very frightening. I like Keller's description of the national media's coverage of a single tragedy over that of the state's historical, generational, systemic, and ubiquitous tragedy. The sheriff says to Belle, "There'll be a great turnout, though." Belle went on, slapping down the visor, "and not just local folks. Lucinda was young, and it was murder, not an accident. So you can expect a few TV stations to send a big fat van and their own Diane Sawyer wannabe. Tragic death, lost potential, curse of the mountains, etc., etc. Then they'll all move on. You don't like TV news, I take it?" "Doesn't matter whether I like it or not. Way of the world. But no, I'm not crazy about the practice of dispatching some grinning fool with perfect hair and overweighted teeth to stand in front of a trailer park and look all serious and concerned whenever there's a death in West Virginia, when the victim is good looking, and when the investigation is liable to be long and hard." She kneaded the steering wheel with her thumbs, pushing at it restlessly. "If they want to cover something, why don't they cover the real story around here? The fact that over half the children in Raythoon County go to bed hungry at night, or the fact that a majority of our senior citizens can't afford to keep the heat on all winter long, or that prescription drug abuse is killing us little by little. I'll tell you why. Because it's not sexy, it's not titillating, it's just a damn shame, and nobody has any idea what the hell to do about it." I like her analogies on page 92 when characterizing one of her fellow state's attorneys. She says she describes her sartorial tastes leaned more toward Dolly Parton than Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And that's unfortunately probably very true of a number of the citizens of West Virginia, but one of the things that adds to their charms. I like her third person narration coupled with a unique interior monologue. Um, there are a few things that I do not like. On page 22, she discusses the sheriff's wife and says, "Mary Sue Ross, a third grade teacher at Ackers Gap Elementary." Nick had met Mary Sue Ross, a third grade teacher at Ackers Gap Elementary, and married her. Then again on page 74, she says, "Later, he met and married Mary Sue Ross, a third grade teacher at Ackers Gap Elementary." They're forgivable. The way that it's written, it becomes repetitive. On page 320, Keller writes, "Yet Mary Lou's husband was unemployed, and they had an ever-increasing brood, the contemplation of which generally made Nick Fogelsong sigh and quote his father, 'The rich get richer and the poor get children.'" That is a quote from a song written in 1921. Some of you may be familiar with that from F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, where that song is actually sung instead of attributed to a key character's relative. Last but not least, but I can't overlook this because we tend to have this in mystery stories or series, is the implausibility of so many murders. But as a result of these errors, I am going to go ahead and give this book a B instead of an A, but B's are good. Remember that B's are good, and I would still highly recommend it. And while I'm at this, a shout out to Erasme, my student, who I've mentioned, I believe, before in previous episodes, who did the templates for these letters for me so that I could paint them. Thank you, Erasme. Also, a shout out to my friend who years ago gave me the only West Virginia University hat that I own. Thank you. For next time, I am going to be discussing a quirky book called Bowl Away by Elizabeth McCracken, set right here in Massachusetts. Until then, stay safe, be healthy, and do your homework.